Marley was dead. There is no doubt about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, and the undertaker. Scrooge signed it. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail. I don't mean to say that I know of my own knowledge what there is particularly dead about a doornail. I might have been inclined myself to regard a coffin nail as the deadest piece of iron in the trade. You will, therefore, permit me to repeat emphatically that Marley was as dead as a doornail. Scrooge knew he was dead. Of course he did. Scrooge and he were partners for I don't know how many years. Scrooge was his sole executor, his sole administrator, his sole friend, and sole mourner. And even Scrooge was not so dreadfully cut up by the sad event, but that he was an excellent man of business. The mention of Marley's funeral brings me back to the point I started from. There is no doubt that Marley was dead. This must be distinctly understood, or nothing wonderful can come of the story I am going to tell. Scrooge never painted out old Marley's name. There it stood, years afterward, above the warehouse door. Scrooge and Marley. The firm was known as Scrooge and Marley. Sometimes people new to the business called Scrooge, and sometimes Marley, but he answered to both names. It was all the same to him, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone. Scrooge, a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner, hard and sharp as flint, secret and self-contained, and solitary as an oyster. The cold within him froze his old features, nipped his pointed nose, shriveled his cheeks, made his eyes red, his thin lips blue, and spoke out shrewdly in his grating voice. Gray hair was on his head and on his eyebrows and his wiry chin. He carried his own low temperature always about with him. He iced his office, didn't thaw it 1 degree, even at Christmas. Nobody ever stopped him in the street to say, "My dear Scrooge, how are you? When will you come to see me?" No beggars implored him. No children asked him for the time. No man or woman ever once in all his life inquired the way to such and such a place of Scrooge. Even the blind men's dogs appeared to know him, and when they saw him coming, would tug their owners into doorways or alleys. Once upon a time, on Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat busy in his office. It was cold, bleak, biting weather. He could hear the people outside, stamping their feet upon the pavement to warm them. The city clocks had only just struck 5, but it was quite dark already. It had not been light all day. The fog came pouring in at every chink and keyhole. The door of Scrooge's office was open that he might keep his eye upon his clerk, who in a dismal little office beyond, a sort of prison cell, was copying letters. Scrooge had a very small fire, but the clerk's fire was so very much smaller that it looked like one coal. But he couldn't replenish it, for Scrooge kept the coal box locked. The clerk put on his jacket and tried to warm himself at the candle.
A Merry Christmas, Uncle. God save you.
Bah humbug.
It was the voice of Scrooge's nephew, who entered the front door so quickly that this was the first Scrooge noticed his approach. He had so heated himself with rapid walking in the fog and frost, this nephew of Scrooge's, that he was all in a glow. His face was handsome, and his eyes sparkled.
Christmas a humbug, Uncle? You don't mean that, I'm sure.
I do. Merry Christmas. What right have you to be merry? What reason have you to be merry? You're poor enough.
Come then, what right have you to be dismal? What reason have you to be morose? You're rich enough.
Bah humbug!
Don't be cross, uncle.
What else can I be when I live in a world with such fools as this? Merry Christmas. What's Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without money, a time for finding yourself a year older but not an hour richer, a time for balancing your books and having every item in them audited. If I could work my will, every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips would be boiled in his own pudding, and buried with a stake of holly through his heart he should.
Uncle!
Nephew, you keep Christmas in your own way, and let me keep it in mine.
Keep it? But you don't keep it.
Let me leave it alone, then. Much good it may do you. Much good it has ever done you.
There are many things I might have derived good, but which I have not profited. Dare I say Christmas most of all. I'm sure I've always thought of Christmas as a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. The only time I know in the long calendar of the year when men and women seem by one consent to open their closed hearts freely, and to think of people as they were, fellow passengers to the grave, and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys. And therefore, uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that it has done me good, and will do me good. And I say, God bless it.
Here, here.
Let me hear another sound from you and you'll keep your Christmas by losing your job. You're quite a powerful speaker, nephew. Why don't you go into politics?
Don't be angry, uncle. Come, dine with us tomorrow.
No, thank you.
But why? Why?
Why did you get married?
Because I fell in love.
Because you fell in love. Good afternoon.
Uncle, but you never came to see me before I was married. Why give it as a reason for not coming now?
Good afternoon.
I want nothing from you. I ask nothing of you. Why can't we be friends?
Good afternoon.
I'm sorry with all my heart to find you so resolute. We've never had any quarrel to which I've been a party. But I've made the trial and homage to Christmas, and I'll keep my Christmas humor to the last. So a Merry Christmas, Uncle.
Good afternoon.
And a Happy New Year.
Good afternoon.
His nephew left the room without an angry word, notwithstanding. He stopped at the outer door to bestow the greetings of the season on the clerk, who, cold as he was warmer than Scrooge, for he returned them cordially.
There's another fellow, my clerk, with $5 a week, a wife and family, talking about a Merry Christmas.
Two people came into Scrooge's front door. They were portly gentlemen, pleasant to behold, and now stood with their hats off in Scrooge's office. They had books and papers in their hands and bowed to him.
Two men here to see you, sir.
Let them in, let them in.
Scrooge and Marley's, I believe. Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley?
Mr. Marley has been dead these 7 years. He died 7 years ago this very night.
We have no doubt his generosity is well represented by his surviving partner.
At this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, it is more than usually urgent that we should make some slight provisions for the poor and destitute who suffer greatly at this time of year. Many thousands are in want of common necessities. Hundreds of thousands are in want of common comfort, sir.
Are there no prisons?
Plenty of prisons.
Are there no workhouses?
Yes, there are.
Oh, I was afraid from what you've said at first that something had occurred to stop their useful course. I'm very glad to hear it.
Sir, are you under the impression that the government furnishes Christmas cheer of mind or body to people? A few of us fortunate are endeavoring to raise funds to buy the poor some meat and drink and means of warmth. We choose this time because it's a time of all others when need is keenly felt and abundance rejoices. What shall I put you down for?
Nothing.
You wish to be anonymous?
I wish to be left alone. Since you asked me what I wish, gentlemen, that is the answer. I don't make merry myself at Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. I pay taxes to help support the establishments and programs I have mentioned. They cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there.
Many cannot go there, and many would rather die.
If they would rather die, they had better do it and decrease the surplus population. Besides, I don't know what will happen to them.
But you do know.
It's not my business. It's enough for a man to understand his own business and not to interfere with other people's. Mine occupies me constantly. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Seeing clearly that it will be useless to pursue their point, The gentleman withdrew. Scrooge returned his labors with an improved opinion of himself and in a more facetious temper than was usual with him. Meanwhile, the fog and darkness thickened so that people ran about with their flaring links, proffering their services to go before horses and carriages and conduct them on their way. Foggier yet, and colder, piercing, searching, biting cold. If the good St. Dunstan had but nipped the evil spirit's nose with a touch of such weather as that, instead of using his familiar weapons, then indeed he would have been roared to lusty purpose. The owner of one scant young nose, gnawed and mumbled by the hungry cold as bones are gnawed by dogs, stooped down at Scrooge's keyhole to regale him with a Christmas carol. But at the first sound of "God bless you, merry gentlemen, may nothing you dismay," Scrooge seized the ruler with such energy of action that the singer fled in terror, leaving the keyhole to the fog and even more congenial frost. Closing time at Scrooge's office had arrived. With an ill will, Scrooge dismounted from his stool and tacitly admitted the fact to the expectant clerk in the tank, who instantly snuffed his candle out and put on his hat.
You'll want all day tomorrow, I suppose, Cratchit.
If quite convenient, sir.
It's not convenient, and it's not fair. And yet you'd think ill of me if I don't pay you a day's wages for no work.
Christmas only comes around once a year.
A poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December. But I suppose you must have the whole day. Be here all the earlier the next morning.
I will, sir.
The office was closed in a twinkling, and the clerk, with the long ends of his white coat, went down the road. In honor of its being Christmas Eve, ran home as hard as he could to see his family. Scrooge took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, and having read all the newspapers and beguiled the rest of the evening with his banker books, went home to bed. He lived in chambers which had once belonged to his deceased partner. It was old enough now, and dreary enough, for nobody lived in it but Scrooge, the other rooms being all let out as offices. The yard was so dark that even Scrooge, who knew its every stone, was fain to grope with his hands. The fog and frost so hung about the black old gateway of the house that it seemed as if the genius of the weather sat in mournful meditation on the threshold. Now, it is a fact that there was nothing at all particular about the knocker on the door, except that it was very large. It is also a fact that Scrooge had seen it night and morning during his whole residence in that place. Also that Scrooge had as little of what is called fancy about him as any man. Let it also be borne in mind that Scrooge had not bestowed one thought on Marley since his last mention of his 7 years dead partner that afternoon. And then let any man explain to me, if he can, how it happened that Scrooge, having his key in the lock of the door, saw in the knocker, without its undergoing any intermediate process of change, not a knocker, but Marley's face. Marley's face. It was not angry, but looked as Scrooge as Marley used to look, with ghostly spectacles turned up on its ghostly forehead. The hair was curiously stirred, as if by breath or hot air, and though the eyes were wide open, they were perfectly motionless. That and its livid color made it horrible, but its horror seemed to be in spite of the face and beyond its control. rather than a part of its own expression. As Scrooge looked at this phenomenon, it was a knocker again. To say that he was not startled, or that his blood was not conscious of a terrible sensation to which it had been a stranger from infancy, would be untrue. But he put his hand upon the key he had relinquished, turned it sturdily, walked in, and lighted his candle.
Nonsense.
He did pause, with a moment's irresolution, before he shut the door, and he did look cautiously behind it first, as if he half expected to be terrified with the sight of Marley's face. Up Scrooge went, not caring to light a candle. Darkness is cheap, and Scrooge liked it. But before he shut his heavy door, he walked through his rooms to see that all was right. He had just enough recollection of the face to desire to do that.
Humbug. Nonsense. Pure nonsense.
Sitting room, bedroom, washroom, all as they should be. Nobody under the table, nobody under the sofa. A small fire in the grate, spoon and basin ready, and the little saucepan of gruel upon the stove. Scrooge checked that nobody was under the bed and nobody in the closet. Quite satisfied, he closed his door and locked himself in. Double locked himself in, which was not his custom. Thus secured against surprise, he took off his clothes and put on his bathrobe, his slippers, and his nightcap, and sat down before the fire to take his gruel. It was a very low fire indeed, nothing on such a bitter night. He was obliged to sit close to it and brood over it before he could extract the least sensation of warmth from such a handful of fuel. The fireplace was an old one, built by some Dutch merchant long ago, and paved all round with quaint Dutch tiles. As he threw his head back in the chair, his glance happened to rest upon a bell, a disused bell that hung in the room and communicated for some purpose now forgotten with a chamber in the highest story of the building. It was with great astonishment and with a strange, inexplicable dread that as he looked, he saw this bell begin to swing. It swung so softly in the outset that it scarcely made a sound. But soon it rang out loudly, and so did every bell in the house. This might have lasted half a minute, or a minute, but it seemed an hour. The bells ceased as they had begun. They were succeeded by a clanking noise deep down below, as if some person were dragging a heavy chain over the casks in the wine merchant's cellar. Scrooge then remembered to have heard that ghosts in haunted houses were described as dragging chains. The cellar door flew open with a booming sound, and then he heard the noise, much louder, on the floors below, then coming up the stairs, then coming straight towards his door.
It's humbug still. I won't believe it.
His color changed, though, when, without a pause, it came on through the heavy door and passed into the room before his eyes. Upon it coming in, the dying flame leaped up as though it cried,
I know him. Marley's ghost.
The same face, the very same. Marley in his usual waistcoat, pants, and boots. His body was transparent, so that Scrooge, observing him and looking through his waistcoat, could see the 2 buttons on his coat behind. Though he looked the phantom through and through and saw it standing before him, though he felt the chilling influence of its death-cold eyes and gazed at the bandage bound about its head and chin, he was still incredulous and fought against his senses.
How now? What do you want with me?
Much. It was Marley's voice, no doubt about it.
Who are you?
Ask me who I was.
Who are you then? You're particular for a ghost.
Life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley.
Can you sit down?
I can.
Do it then.
Scrooge asked the question because he didn't know whether a ghost so transparent might find himself in a condition to take a chair, and felt that in the event of its being impossible, it might involve the necessity of an embarrassing explanation. But the ghost sat down on the opposite side of the fireplace, as if he were quite used to it. You don't believe in me.
I don't.
What evidence would you have of my reality beyond that of your own senses?
I don't know.
Why do you doubt your senses?
Because a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheats. You might be an undigested piece of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of underdone potato. There's more of gravy than of grave about you, whatever you are.
Scrooge was not much in the habit of cracking jokes. The truth is that he tried to be smart as a means of distracting his own attention and keeping down his terror, for the specter's voice disturbed the very marrow in his bones. To sit staring at those fixed, glazed eyes in silence for a moment would frighten him to his very core. There was something very awful about the specter, being surrounded with an infernal atmosphere of its own. Scrooge could not feel it himself, but this was clearly the case, for though the ghost sat perfectly motionless, its hair and sleeves and pants moved as by the hot vapor from an oven.
You see this toothpick?
I do,
You are not looking at it.
but I see it.
Well, I have but to swallow this and be for the rest of my days persecuted by a legion of goblins? All of my own creation? Humbug, I tell you. Humbug.
At this, the spirit raised a frightful cry and shook its chain with such a dismal and appalling noise that Scrooge held on tight to his chair to save himself from falling over. But how much greater was his horror when the phantom, taking off the bandage round its head as if it were too warm to wear indoors, its lower jaw dropped down to the floor.
Mercy! Dreadful apparition, why do you trouble me?
Man of this worldly mind, do you believe in me or not?
I do, I must. But why do spirits walk the earth? And why do you come to me?
It is required of every man that the spirit within him should walk abroad among humanity and travel far and wide. And if that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to do so after death. It is doomed to wander through this world. Oh, woe is me, and witness what it cannot share, but might have shared on earth, joy and happiness. Again the specter raised a loud cry and shook its chain and wrung its shadowy head. Scrooge dropped to his knees.
Marley, you're chained and bound. Tell me why.
I wear the chain I forged in life. I made it link by link and yard by yard. I girded it on of my own free will, and of my own free will I wore it.
Is its pattern strange to you? Or would you know the weight and length of the chain you will bear yourself in the afterlife? It is as heavy and as long as the 7 Christmas Eves ago. You have labored on it since. It is a ponderous chain.
Scrooge glanced about him on the floor in the expectation of finding himself surrounded by some 50 or 60 fathoms of iron cable. But he could see nothing.
Jacob, old Jacob Marley, tell me more. Speak comfort to me, Jacob.
I have none to give. It comes from other regions, Ebenezer Scrooge, and is conveyed by other ministers to other kinds of men. Nor can I tell you what I know. A very little more is all permitted to me. I cannot rest. I cannot stay. I cannot linger anywhere. My spirit never walked beyond our office. Hear me! In life, my spirit never roved beyond the narrow limits of our money-making hole. Now weary journeys lie before me.
It was a habit with Scrooge, whenever he became thoughtful, to put his hands in his pockets. Pondering on what the ghost had said, he did so now, but without lifting up his eyes or getting off his knees.
You must have been very slow about it, Jacob.
Slow.
7 years dead, and traveling all the time.
Whole time. No rest. No peace. Incessant torture of remorse.
You travel fast?
The wings of the wind.
You might have got over a great quantity of ground in 7 years.
The ghost, on hearing this, set up another cry and clanked its chain so hideously in the dead silence of the night that the neighbors would have been justified in condemning it as a nuisance.
Oh, I am captive, bound, and double ironed. Not to know that any Christmas spirit working kindly in this little sphere will find its mortal life too short for vast means of usefulness. Not to know that no space of regret can make amends for one's life opportunity misused. Yet such was I. Oh, such was I.
But you were always a good man of business, Jacob.
Business. Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, kindness, and benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business.
Scrooge was very much dismayed to hear the specter going on at this rate, and began to quake exceedingly.
At this time of the rolling year, I suffer most. Why did I walk through crowds of fellow beings with my eyes turned down, and never raise them to that blessed star which led the wise men to a poor abode? Were there no poor homes to which its light could have conducted me? Hear me! My time is nearly gone.
I will, but don't be hard upon me. Jacob, help me. How is it that I can escape this fate?
You should know there is no light part of my penance. I am here tonight to warn you that you still have a chance and hope of escaping my fate. Just a chance and hope, Ebenezer.
You are always a good friend to me. Thank you.
You will be haunted by 3 spirits.
Is that the chance and hope you mentioned, Jacob?
It is.
I think I'd rather not.
Without their visits, you cannot hope to escape the path I tread. Expect the first tomorrow, when the bell tolls 1.
Couldn't I meet them all at once and have it over, Jacob?
Expect the second on the next night, at the same hour, the third upon the next night, when the last stroke of 12 has ceased to vibrate. Look to see me no more, and look that, for your own sake, you remember what has passed between us.
Jacob, please, Jacob!
When it had said these words, the specter took its bandage from the table and bound it round its head as before. Scrooge knew this by the clicking sound its teeth made when the jaws were brought together by the bandage. Scrooge ventured to raise his eyes again and found his supernatural visitor standing next him, with its chain wound over and about its arm. The apparition walked backwards from him, and at every step it took, the window raised itself a little, so that when the specter reached it, it was wide open. It beckoned Scrooge to approach, which he did. They were within 2 paces of each other. Marley's ghost held up its hand, warning him to come no nearer. Scrooge stopped, not so much in obedience as in surprise and fear, for on the raising of the hand, he became sensible of confused noises in the air, incoherent sounds of lamentation and regret, wailings inexpressibly sorrowful and self-accusatory. The specter, after listening for a moment, joined in the mournful dirge and floated out upon the bleak, dark night. Scrooge followed to the window, desperate in his curiosity. He looked out. The air was filled with phantoms, wandering hither and thither in restless haste and moaning as they went. Every one of them wore chains like Marley's ghost. Some few were linked together. None were free. Many had been personally known to Scrooge in their lives. He had been quite familiar with one old ghost in a white waistcoat with a monstrous iron safe attached to its ankle, who cried at being unable to assist a wretched woman with an infant who it saw below upon a doorstep. The misery with them all was clearly that they sought to interfere for good in human matters and had lost that power forever. Whether these creatures faded into mist or mist enshrouded them, he could not tell. But they and their spirit voices faded together, and the night became as it had been when he walked home. Scrooge closed the window and examined the door by which the ghost had entered. It was double-locked as he had locked it with his own hands, and the bolts were undisturbed. He tried to say humbug, but stopped at the first syllable. Whether from the emotion he had undergone, or the fatigues of the day, or his glimpse of the invisible world, or the late hour, Scrooge went straight to bed without undressing and fell asleep upon the instant.
6, 7, 8. It was past 2 when I went to bed. It's impossible that I could have slept through a whole day, all the way into another night. It's impossible. Nothing could have happened to the sun, but yet it's 12 at noon?
The thought of sleeping through the day alarmed him. He scrambled out of bed and searched his way towards the window, All he could make out was that it was very foggy, extremely cold, and there was no noise of anyone running here and there, as there no doubt would have been. It was as if night had beaten off the bright day and taken possession of the world.
What's going on?
Scrooge went to bed again and thought and thought and thought it over and over. He couldn't figure it out. But suddenly he remembered that the ghost warned him of a visitation when the bell struck 1. He was determined to stay awake until the hour was past.
The hour itself and nothing else.
Oh.
What in the bells of hell are you?
Scrooge, starting off in a half recumbent attitude, found himself face to face with the unearthly visitor who drew near him on his bed. It was as close to him as I am now to you, and I am standing in the spirit at your elbow.
Are you the ghost I was told to be expecting?
I am.
It was a strange figure, like a child, yet not like a child, more like an old man, viewed through some supernatural medium, which diminished his appearance to a child's proportions.
Who? What are you?
I am the ghost of Christmas past.
Long past?
No, your past. Get up from your bed and walk with me.
The grasp, though gentle as a woman's hand, was not to be resisted. Scrooge rose, clasped his robe, and supplicated to the spirit as he found that it was moving towards the window.
I'm only human. I will fall.
The ghost laid his hand upon Scrooge's heart.
Touch my unwashed hand, and you shall be upheld in more than this.
As the words were spoken, they passed through the wall and stood upon an open country road with fields on either hand.
Good heaven. I was raised here as a boy. I went to school here.
He was conscious of 1,000 odors floating in the air, each one connected with 1,000 thoughts and hopes and joys and cares long, long forgotten.
Your lip is trembling.
I'm fine.
What's on your cheek?
I don't know. It's nonsense. It's a raindrop. Come on, lead on. Lead on, lead.
Do you remember the way?
Do I? I could walk it blindfolded.
A few shaggy ponies could be seen trotting towards them with young boys on their backs, who called to other boys in carts, driven by farmers. All these boys were cheery and shouted to each other, filling the broad fields with joyous music, and the crisp air laughed to hear it.
These are but shadows of the things that have already passed. They are not aware of our presence.
Scrooge knew the boys and named every one of them. He was filled with so much joy when he heard them say Merry Christmas to one another and went their separate ways at the crossroads. What was Merry Christmas to Scrooge? What did it mean to him? What good has it ever done for him?
The school is not yet empty. There's a lonely child who's been neglected by his friends, is left there still.
I know. Yes, I know.
They were now in the heart of New York City. It was evening, and the streets were lit up. It was obvious by the appearance of the shops that it was Christmas time again. The ghost stopped at a certain warehouse door.
Do you recognize this place?
Know it? How could I forget? I was an apprentice here. Is that old Fezziwig? Bless his heart. It's Fezziwig when he was alive.
Hilly-ho there, Ebenezer, Dick. Now let's help that lady and put that away, eh?
Scrooge's former self, as a grown young man that is, rushed in, accompanied by his fellow apprentice.
Wait, that's Dick Wilkins, bless me, it is. How I miss him. Dick was so attached to me. Dear, dear, poor Dick.
All right, my boys. No more work tonight. It's Christmas evening. Christmas, Ebenezer. Christmas, Dick. Close up the shop.
You wouldn't believe how those two young men charged into the streets with the shutters. 1, 2, 3 had them up in their places. 4, 5, 6 barred and pinned. Then 7, 8, 9, and came back before you could have got to 12, panting like racehorses.
Hilly ho, clear away, my lads, and let's make lots of room here. Hurry up, Dick. Cheer up, Ebenezer.
Clear away? There was nothing they wouldn't have cleared away or couldn't have cleared away, with old Fezziwig looking on. Suddenly, in came all the young men and women employed in the business. In came in the housemaid with her cousin, the baker, the cook with her brothers, and her particular friend, the milkman. In they all came, one after another, some shyly, some boldly, some gracefully, some awkwardly, some pushing, some pulling. In they all came, anyhow and everyhow. And away they went, 20 couples at once, hands half round and back again the other way, down the middle and up again, round and round in various stages of affectionate grouping. Old couples closest to the music, always turning up in the wrong place. New couples starting off again, and all couples at last, and not a single one idle.
Look at Fezziwig. Isn't it wonderful? The way he danced, no one's better than him. He was glorious. How I remember him so. And Miss Fezziwig too. Oh, what a great party.
More people danced, and some people quit, accompanied by more dances. And there was cake, and there was haggis, and there was a great piece of cold roast, and there was a great piece of cold boiled ham, and there was mince pies and plenty of liquor. When the clock struck 11, this dance party broke up.
Oh dear, dear, dear.
A mere importance to make these silly folks feel a sense of gratefulness.
Mere?
He spent just a few dollars of your mortal money, perhaps 3 or 4.
It isn't that. It isn't that, Spirit. The happiness he gave us. It was just as great as it cost a fortune. It's...
What's the matter now?
Nothing particular.
Is it something important?
No, I wish I was able to say a word or two to my clerk just now. That's all.
Scrooge saw his former self, older now, in the prime of his life. He whispered a wish as he put out the candles. His face had not the harsh and rigid lines of later years, but it did have the signs of care and greed. He was not alone, but sat beside a beautiful young lady who wore a dress for mourning. Her eyes were full of tears, which sparkled in the light that emitted from the ghost of Christmas past.
It means nothing to you. Nothing at all. Another idol has taken my place. And if this idol can cheer and comfort you in the days and years to come, as I would have done for you, I have no cause to grieve.
What idol has taken your place?
A golden one. I have seen your honorable ambitions fall off one by one, until the master passion greed absorbed you. Am I wrong?
So what if I have grown to be wiser? It doesn't mean I changed towards you, have I?
By your own words, you admit that you are not who you once were. I, on the other hand, am the same today as I were yesterday. We promised happiness to each other, and we were one heart, but yours is filled with misery. I see it now that we are two. How often and how intensely I've thought of this, I don't know. But I thought of it enough to say, I release you.
Release me? From what? I never asked to be released from anything. Did I seek to be released?
In words? No, never.
In what then?
Don't misunderstand it. I still love you. But in a changed nature, in an altered spirit, in another atmosphere of life, in another hope as its great end, in everything that made my love of any worth or value in your sight, it is by that in which I release you, with a full heart, for the man who I loved, the man who you once were. May you be happy in the life you have chosen.
Spirit, no more. Show me no more. Please take me home. Why do you take pleasure in torturing me?
One more.
No more.
You have one shadow more.
No more. I don't want to see it. Don't show me any more.
But the relentless ghost grabbed both his arms and forced him to watch what happened next. They were in another scene and place. It was a small room and it lacked elegance. However, it was full of comfort. Near a fire sat a beautiful young lady. She was the same woman that Scrooge saw in the last scene. However, she was now a loving wife, and across from her sat her daughter. This caused Scrooge to pay close attention. When the man of the house appeared, he sat beside his daughter and his wife by the fire. Scrooge began to think how such a creature, quite as graceful and as full of promise, might have called him father.
Belle, do you know who I saw this afternoon?
Who was it?
An old friend of yours. Take a guess.
How can I? I already know. Mr. Scrooge.
It was. I passed by his office window and could see inside. He had a candle lit, but I could scarcely see him. He sat there alone as his partner lies upon the point of death.
No. No, no.
Sad. He's all alone in the world.
Spirit, take me away from here.
I told you these are things that have already been. They are what they are. Don't blame me for the choices you've made.
Get me out of here. Take me away from this place. I can't take it.
He gazed upon the ghost and noticed that it looked at him with a strange face. It appeared to have fragments of all the faces it had shown him and wrestled with it.
No, no, leave me. Take me back. Haunt me no longer.
Scrooge quickly grabbed an extinguisher cap and threw it over the ghost and pressed down with all his force.
No, haunt me. No, no, no.
Scrooge awoke and sat up in bed, struggling to get his thoughts together. The clock had just struck 1. Scrooge turned uncomfortably cold when he began to wonder which of the curtains this new specter would draw back and emerge from. Deciding he would rather not be taken by surprise again, Scrooge crawled out of bed and opened all the curtains.
That ought to do it.
Suddenly, a blaze of warm, ruddy light filled the room.
Come in, Scrooge!
Scrooge turned around to see that the bedroom had undergone a sudden and surreal transformation. The walls and ceiling were now overgrown with ivy and kudzu, forming what looked like a perfect grove. And where the bed was now heaps of food. A stunning feast of glazed turkeys, cooked geese, honey-baked hams, huge wreaths of plump, meaty sausages, ripe peaches, chili-cheeked apples, immense steaming bowls of punch, and plenty of rich chocolate pudding dessert. Most curious was how it was all stacked to form a perfect throne, and upon this great feast of a throne sat a jolly giant, glorious to see, who bore a glowing torch, shaped not unlike a horn of plenty. The giant held it up high, and let its warm light shine on Scrooge.
Come in! Come in and get to know me better, man.
Who are you?
Who am I? Why, I'm the ghost of Christmas present.
Scrooge hung his head before the spirit, trying not to meet his gaze.
Come, look upon me, for you have never seen the like of me before.
Well, no, not until recently at least. But if you don't mind, I'd rather get this over with sooner than later.
All right, then. Touch my robe.
Scrooge did as he was told and grabbed a handful of the spirit's great furry coat. All vanished instantly. The bedroom, the feast, the ruddy glow and vines, gone, replaced by city streets on Christmas morning.
Why bring me here, spirit?
Come, walk with me, Scrooge.
The spirit led him away from the crowds and merriments and the sights and smells of Christmas Day, down a maze of back alleys, until the two were at the small home where Bob Cratchit and his family dwelt. And there, upon the threshold of Bob Cratchit's door, the spirit smiled.
What's keeping our father and Tiny Tim? And Martha? Why is she late too? Dinner's getting cold.
Mother, I'm home finally.
Mom, Martha's home.
Why, bless your heart alive. My dear, why are you so late?
We had a lot of work to do last night and had to leave this morning.
Well, never mind that. So long as you're here, that's all that matters. Here, you've had a long day.
Yes, thank you, Mother.
Look, Martha, Dad's coming. Let's hide.
So Martha hid herself, and in came little Bob, the father, and Tiny Tim upon his shoulders.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Oh, Merry Christmas, Timmy.
Alas, poor Tiny Tim was a cripple and could only walk with a crutch and legs supported in heavy braces.
Honey, where's our Martha?
Not coming.
Not coming? Not coming on Christmas Day?
Why, here I am.
And how did little Tim behave?
As good as gold. Somehow, he gets thoughtful sitting alone so much and thinks the strangest things you've ever heard. He told me coming home tonight, he said he hoped that people at church saw him. He said that because he's a cripple, it might be a pleasant reminder who made lame beggars walk and blind men see. Ah, the punch! Merry Christmas to us all. God bless us.
God bless us, everyone.
Now come, let's all gather around the table.
Tiny Tim sits very close by his father upon a little stool. Bob held the boy's little withered hand in his, as if he loved the child and wished to keep him by his side, and dreaded that he might be taken from his side.
Spirit, tell me, will this Tiny Tim child live?
I see a vacant little stool in the corner, and a crutch without an owner, carefully preserved. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child will die.
No, oh no. Kind spirit, say he will be spared.
If he be like to die, he had better do it, and decrease the surplus population.
Oh dear.
Man, if man you be in heart, forbear that wicked can't until you have discovered what the surplus is and where it is. Will you to decide what men shall live and what men shall die?
To Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast.
The founder of the feast, my foot. I wish that old cheapskate were here right now. I'd give him a piece of my mind to feast on.
My dear, the children, Christmas Day.
I'll drink to his health, for your sake, and the days, but not for him. So long life to Scrooge. A Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. I'm sure he'll be very merry and very happy, I have no doubt. To Mr. Scrooge.
To Mr. Scrooge.
Mr. Scrooge!
Then Scrooge and the spirit whisked into the night air over the shadowed land. The ghost sped on, above the black and heaving sea, on, until being far away, as he told Scrooge, from any shore, they lighted on a ship. They stood beside the helmsman at the wheel, the lookout in the bow, the officers who had the watch, dark, ghostly figures in their several stations. But every man among them hummed a Christmas tune, or had a Christmas thought, or spoke below his breath to his companion of some bygone Christmas day, with homeward hopes belonging to it. And every man on board, waking or sleeping, good or bad, had had a kinder word for another on that day than on any day in the year, and had shared to some extent in its festivities, and had remembered those he cared for at a distance, and had known that they delighted to remember him. It was a great surprise to Scrooge, while listening to the moaning of the wind, and thinking what a solemn thing it was to move on through the lonely darkness over an unknown abyss, whose depths were secrets as profound as death. It was a great surprise to Scrooge, while thus engaged, to hear a hearty laugh. It was a much greater surprise to Scrooge to recognize it as his own nephew's, and to find himself in a bright, dry, gleaming room, with the Spirit standing smiling by his side and looking at that same nephew with approving affability. If you should happen, by any unlikely chance, to happen to know a man more best at a laugh than Scrooge's nephew, all I can say is, I'd like to know him too. Introduce me to him, and I will cultivate his acquaintance.
He said Christmas was a humbug. He believed it too.
Oh, shame on him, Fred.
As unpleasant as he may be, his choices carry their own punishment. Of that I'm certain, so I'll have nothing to say against him.
I'm sure he's very rich, Fred. At least you always tell me so.
But what of that, my dear? His wealth is of no use to him. He doesn't do any good with it. He doesn't make himself happy with it.
Well, I have no pity for him.
I do. I'm sorry for him. I couldn't be angry with him if I tried. Here he goes out of his way to dislike us. He refuses to come and dine with us. What's the consequence? He doesn't lose much of a dinner, and you know what? I'll give him the same chance to join us every year, whether he likes it or not, for I pity him. He may rail at Christmas till he dies, but he can't help thinking better of it. I defy him. If he finds me going there in good temper year after year and saying, Uncle Scrooge, how are you? If it only puts him in vain to leave his poor clerk $1 for Christmas, that's something, and I think I shook him yesterday. Here's to Uncle Scrooge.
Well, Uncle Scrooge.
Scrooge had become so imperceptibly gay and light of heart, he would have pledged the unaware company in return, and thanked them in inaudible speech if the ghost had given him time. But the whole scene passed off in the breath of the last words spoken by his nephew, and he and the Spirit were again on their travels. Much they saw, and far they went, and many homes they visited, but always with a happy end. The Spirit left his blessing and told Scrooge his precepts. It was a long night, if it were only a night, but Scrooge had his doubts of this because the ghost grew older, clearly older. Scrooge had observed this change, but never spoke of it until looking at the Spirit as they stood together in an open place, and he noticed the Spirit's hair was gray.
Are spirits' lives so short?
My life upon this world is very brief. It ends tonight at midnight. The time is drawing near. Look here.
What? What are these?
The Spirit pulled aside the folds of his robe, and there stood two children, wretched, abject, frightened, hideous, miserable. They knelt down at the Spirit's feet and began to climb the outside of his garment.
Oh man, look here. Look. Look down here.
Oh, me.
They were a boy and a girl, yellow, meager, ragged, wolfish, ugly, where graceful youth should have filled their features out. A stale and shriveled hand pinched and twisted it.
Spirit, are those your kids?
They are man's. They cling to me, begging for their father. This boy is ignorance. This girl is want. Beware them both, and all their kind, but most of all beware this boy, for on his brow I see written the word doom, unless the writing be erased. I dare you to deny it. I dare you to slander those who claim otherwise, and see where it leads.
Have they no refuge or resource?
Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses?
Scrooge looked around for the ghost and could not find it. His last bell ceased to vibrate. He remembered the prediction of old Jacob Marley, and as he lifted his eyes, lo and behold, a grim-looking phantom stood before him, draped and hooded. It moved on the ground like a mist towards him. The phantom slowly, silently, and grimly approached him. As it approached, Scrooge soon became weak in his legs and fell down upon his knees. The very air through which the phantom moved seemed to scatter darkness and dread. It was shrouded in a deep black garment which concealed its head, its face, and form, and left nothing of it visible except for one outstretched hand.
Are you the ghost of Christmas yet to come?
The spirit said nothing, aside from pointing forward with its hand.
I know that you are about to show me things that have yet to happen and will take place in the future. Am I right, Spirit? If you must know, Ghost of the Future, I fear you more than the other specters I have seen, because I know your purpose is to set me straight. And as I hope to live, I am able to be a better man. For what am I now? I am scared to bear your company. However, I will do it with a thankful heart. Spirit, are you not going to say anything to me?
It gave him no reply. Its hand stood outstretched and pointed straight before him.
Okay, Spirit, lead on. The night is almost over, and its hours are precious to me. I know. Lead on.
The phantom moved away from him, the same as it did when it came towards him. Scrooge followed in the shadow of its black garment, which bore him up. He thought and carried him along. Right before his eyes, the city seemed to spring up before him, and they soon found themselves some distance from a small group of businessmen. Observing that the phantom's hand was pointed towards them, Scrooge approached them to listen to their conversation.
No, I don't know much about it. All I know is that he died.
When?
Last night, I believe.
I thought he never died. What killed him?
Who knows?
What's going to happen with his money?
I have no idea. He didn't leave it to me. That's all I know. Probably left it to his company. It would likely be a very cheap funeral. I mean, I don't know anybody who would be willing to go. Maybe we should volunteer.
I don't mind going if lunch is provided.
Well, I'm probably the least interested from all of us. I never wear black gloves, and I never eat lunch. But if you all go, I'll go. You know, now I come to think of it, I'm not so sure I was his most notable friend. We usually held short conversations whenever we met.
And when was that?
Hello, and goodbye.
The phantom moved through the street and pointed its finger to two individuals meeting. Scrooge approached the men, thinking the explanation might lie here.
How's it going?
How are you?
Did you hear? Old Scratch got what he deserved at last.
So I heard. Gold, isn't it?
Christmas is around the corner. Do you skate by any chance?
Me? No. I have other things to do. Anyhow, good morning.
Spirit, I see. What's going on? What is this?
He jumped in terror, for the scene had changed, and his hands almost touched a bed. A bare, uncurtained bed, on which, beneath a ragged sheet, there laid someone covered up. Scrooge glances towards the phantom. Its steady hand raises up and points towards the head of the bed. The blanket was so carelessly draped over the body that the slightest touch of a finger would have uncovered the face.
Spirit, I'm afraid of this place. Please, let's leave it. I do not forget its lesson. Trust me.
Phantom seemed to look upon him as if it were demanding him to look.
Spirit, I beg you, don't make me look. Instead, let me see some affection connected with the death.
Phantom spread its dark robe over him, once again like a wing, and as it withdrew it, they found themselves in a room at poor Bob Cratchit's house.
My son!
It's going to be okay, Father. Don't be sad.
It's Sunday. Did you go today, Robert?
Yes, I wish you came with me. It would have done you good to see how green of a place it is. I know you'll see it soon and often. I promised him that I would walk there on a Sunday. my little child, my son. I'm certain that we will never forget poor Tiny Tim, this first death that was among us.
No, never, Father.
Never.
That makes me happy. Very happy.
Oh, dear Spectre. Something tells me that our journey is almost over. I know it, but I don't know how. The man we saw lying dead, who was he?
He found himself at a churchyard with the spirit, for he desired to learn the name of the wretched man who lay underneath the ground. It was a worthy place, walled in by the houses nearby. It was a place overrun by grass and weeds. The phantom stood among the graves and towered over Scrooge as some sort of giant and pointed downward to a grave before him. Scrooge, on his knees, did not dare to look up at the name upon the gravestone.
Answer me one question. Are these the events of the things that will happen? Or are they the events of things that could be?
The phantom, still with its immovable silence, continued to point downward to the grave by which it stood.
O Spirit, men's choices will signify certain ends, to which, if they persist, they will reap what they have sown. But if they repent from the course, the end will change. Please say that it will be the same with me.
The spirit was firm as ever. Scrooge crawled towards the gravestone, trembling. He glanced at the phantom's finger, but it was still pointed at the grave. As his eyes came upon the tombstone, on the neglected grave, he saw his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge.
No, Spirit, oh no, Spirit. Please hear me. I am no longer the man I was. I know you wouldn't have shown me this if all hope was lost. Good Spirit, I know your nature intercedes for me and pities me. Listen, I will keep Christmas in my heart. I will try to honor it all year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. Please tell me that I can change the writing on this stone.
In his agony, he grabbed the phantom's hand.
No!
It sought to free itself from him, but he held on strong and earnestly. The spirit was, however, stronger and repelled him.
No!
Scrooge held up his hands together in prayer as a last resort and prayed for his fate to be reversed. He saw as the phantom's hood and robe shrunk, it collapsed and vanished down into a bedpost.
No!
If you're wondering, yes, the bedpost was his own. The bed was his own. The room was his own.
Mine. I'm home.
Best of all, the time before him was his own to make good in it.
Oh, Jacob Marley, heaven and God be praised. I say this on my knees, Jacob, on my knees. Christmas is soon here, and I am here. The events that would have taken place are no more. I will do things with a new spirit. I know I will. What should I do? I feel light as a feather, joyful as an angel, as cheerful as a schoolboy. I'm excited as a drunken man. A Merry Christmas to everyone, and a Happy New Year to the world.
He ran to the window and opened it. He stuck his head out with excitement.
How glorious this day is! Glorious! I feel as if I lost track of the time. What day is it? It feels that I've spent days upon days with the spirits. I feel like a baby. I don't know a thing. Whatever, I don't care. I would rather be a baby. Hey, kid!
Yeah?
You seem like a nice boy. What day is it?
Is that a joke? Today's Christmas.
It's Christmas! I didn't miss it. Did this all take place in one night? I guess the spirits can do anything they like. Of course they can. Time has no power over them. Hey, kid!
What?
You know the meat market on the next street over?
Who doesn't?
That's one smart kid. Do you know if they've sold the prize turkey that was hanging up there? Not the little prize turkey, I mean the big one.
The one that's as big as me?
What a funny kid. He's a pleasure to talk to. Yeah, that's the one, kid.
It's hanging there now.
Would you do me a favor and go buy it? Buy them and tell them to bring it here, so I may give them the address where they can take it. If you come back with a man in less than 5 minutes, I'll give you $1.
All right.
I'm going to send it to Bob Cratchit's. He won't know who sent it. The turkey is about twice the size of Tiny Tim.
With laughter he said this. With laughter he paid for the turkey. And with laughter he paid for the cow. And with laughter he compensated the boy. All this were only to be exceeded by the laughter in which he let out as he sat down breathless in his chair and laughed till he cried. He threw on his finest clothes and at last went out into the streets. By this hour, people crowded the streets, just as he had seen them with the ghost of Christmas present. He walked with his hands behind him and greeted everyone with a joyful smile.
Merry Christmas!
Morning, sir. Merry Christmas to you as well.
Merry Christmas, dear!
And Merry Christmas to you, sir.
Merry Christmas, my good man. Nice to see you.
Same to you. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
He went up to the church and walked through the streets and watched people move about, each one going here and there. He also patted children on the head and spoke with beggars. He walked up to houses and glanced in through the kitchen windows and found that everything filled him with happiness. In the afternoon, he went towards his nephew's house.
Fred?
I wonder who that could be. Who is it?
It's me, your uncle. I have come for dinner. Will you let me in, Fred?
Uncle Scrooge? Please, come in. Everyone, look who's here.
Let him in. It's a miracle that he didn't shake his arm right off. He felt right at home in 5 minutes. Nothing could be more lively than that fantastic party. The wonderful games, beautiful unity, and the shared happiness. The next morning, however, he was early at the office. Very early. He wanted to be sure he was there first to catch Bob Cratchit coming in late. That was the thing he had set his heart on. The clock struck 9, and Bob did not appear. A quarter passed, and still no Bob. Bob was 18 minutes and a half late.
Bob? Do you know what time it is?
I'm very sorry, sir. I was running late.
Was? You are. Step this way if you would, please.
Christmas is only once a year, sir. I was extremely tired from yesterday's celebration. Someone sent me the prize turkey from the meat market. Not the small one, the big one. It was twice the size of Tiny Tim. I'm sorry, sir. I know that's no excuse.
Now, I'll tell you what, my friend. I'm not going to stand for this sort of thing any longer. And therefore, I am going to give you a raise.
You're going to give me a raise. What? Are you okay, sir?
A Merry Christmas, Bob, my good friend. A Merrier Christmas to you for the many hard years I gave you. I am going to raise your salary and attempt to help your struggling family. How about we discuss your affairs this very afternoon over a Christmas bowl of smoking bishop? How does that sound, Bob?
Nothing would delight me more, sir.
Call me Ebenezer. We're friends now. And how about you light up the fire and buy another coal scuttle before you dot another I, Bob Cratchit?
Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all and infinitely more. To Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. He had no further encounters with spirits. He possessed the knowledge on how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive had the knowledge. May that be said of us and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone.